Ignite, sparked by BBB, where conversations are taking place to change the future.
All right, everyone, I'll go ahead and start the questioning. Same rules, 60 seconds, be respectful, which you all have been so far. So we're gonna have a good conversation. This is financial wellness for families. And Virginia Credit Union is gonna come up, Sabrina and Rob are gonna come up and talk about that aspect later. But for now, we'll go ahead and get into the questions. What are the biggest financial challenges families face today, and how can we begin to address them? Yes.
This engagement, this type of conference with lots of folks, moms, dads, all different folks, people that come to work on our organization. And it's just by listening, just listening to folks. What I noticed, sound competitive with financial literacy. Financial literacy is a subject that is not as sexy as it should be. And folks just make decisions, financial decisions based on emotional and impulsive reason instead of being well informed. And I really would like to see in our social world that financial literacy become a more popular topic.
Let's look at a breakdown of what are some expenses that families tend to have. I think there was a statistic a while ago that said for each child is cost to about $100,000. 250. That's a lot.
Half of it's childcare.
There you go. And the average number of kids in a household is 2 to 3. That's a lot. So what are some of the expenses that families have, and how do they face those challenges and be able to afford not only putting food on the table, but also having savings accounts for their kids to be able to go to college and not be in severe debt?
Gonna get out of sorry. But one expense that was amazing to me that started happening is when parents started having to give school supplies to donate to the school. And publicly funded programs that one didn't do. But it just added to the value because now with sports and how kids are choosing sports and travel teams, all this stuff, it's just an extra expensive that didn't exist in my childhood. And so it's interesting. It's like every little thing now you've got to commit early, that you think earlier, but there's money for this.
My sister and I both played soccer. My brother played basketball and football. Football's not a cheap sport. That stuff's expensive. Now he snowboards, not any cheaper than anything else. But those are expensive things. And add to the fact that they do ask for Germex to bring in every single year. And pencils, pens, boxes to hold school supplies. And why should that be a load on the parent's shoulder? But then not only that, health issues. We just heard Financial Services of Virginia talk about what you need to save for if your child has a health condition, or if you have a health condition and you can't be at work.
I would say this is definitely a challenge because I saw it on my own family, a lack of financial education. So that's the key to everything, the knowledge. If you as a future parent don't have the tools, then what's next for the next generation that's coming? You know, because I was never taught on how to use a credit card or anything about the interest rate or anything about, APR, retiring plans, anything about it. I learned that the hard way. While, filing your taxes. Why? Because nobody taught my mom and my dad how to do those things. And I'm sure my grandparents didn't know that as well. So it all comes down to knowing the information that you have out there, the opportunity that you have out there to be prepared, because that's what you're gonna, share to the next generation. I think that's the key.
That's true.
It's a lot easier to form good habits early in life, which is why it's important for parents to pass them on to kids. It's a lot easier to form good habits when you're 12 as opposed to 25. I tried snowboarding for the first time when I was 25. It didn't go great. If I started when I was 10, like some of these kids, it would have been a different story, you know? So,
It would be helpful in schools.
Yeah.
Kind of education.
especially on taxes, you know? When it comes to taxes.
It's all part of being prepared. Schools should really do that.
I think the schools do require, that they take a class, but I wish they would include more on student loans and that kind of thing, more than, they include in taxes, but so far as student loans, you see these people that are struggling because they're paying house payment for student loans, and that's one thing we told our girls, look, we have X amount in our 529. You can apply to any school you want to, but it's gonna come down to financial, what we can afford, what is acceptable in a loan, that kind of thing. And so many people feel like their kids have to go to this dream school, but then it's, $100,000 a year. And that puts these kids $400,000 debt when they, thing. And one thing we did with the kids that were little, we had envelopes, and when they would get allowances or whatever, they could put so much in savings and so much in what they could spend, spending money, but and also for donating. So we had 3 or 4 different envelopes. And then at the end of the year, what I would do is match what they had in donations, and we go buy toys or like Toys for Tots or something like that. And that was kind of getting them into that. It's okay that you can donate to, even if it's something small. And we also at 18 made them go talk to our financial advisor and start a Roth. Because he's talked to them, and even though it was $10 a month, he's like, $10 a month when you retire could be $1 million. Even though you don't think it's much. And of course, one now is graduated, so hers is up and she has the 401 and everything. But it makes me start thinking about that, because I didn't think about retirement.
I was gonna say, I didn't start thinking about my money until I started working for my dad, and he kept everything. Everything we made, he kept it, but each week he would say, this is how much you made. And when we would go on a trip for the weekend and I knew like I wanted to do some shopping, I'd say, this is, how much money I want. And he'd say, okay, well, this is how much you have, this is how much you're asking for, and this is what you're left with. So I think teaching kids that money management early on is really important. I think Barry had something to say, and then Bud after that.
I think the cash basis to grandparents, I'm old enough to be that generation where credit cards were not there. Until I got out of college, and they started to become popular. So cash basis is the way to get us all back on our foot. So how do you do that, right? Because we all have got debt. We handle credit card debt. Our complaints for Capital One, their complaints are off the charts. I can tell you that. And so you can just read about it. I mean, 1 out of 5 credit card or individuals' credit cards are maxed. There's nothing else. So that's a big crisis coming any day. So if you have a budget and you know where you're spending the money, and whether Virginia Credit Union can open up 3 different accounts for you, and you can just transfer money back and forth, home savings and everything, and vacation. There used to be vacation clubs, there used to be holiday clubs. I was a bank teller in the 70s, and there were coupon books. You had to stamp them. A hideous way to do it, but it was old school. Now it's all computerized. So cash basis, computer. And I will tell you that a lot of people gross versus net pay. I will guess that probably 3 out of 5 employees don't understand. They get yes, no pay, thank you guys, and what they now have. Which you get, and net is what you now have to spend. And it all leads into the mental health picture, because that stirs up. We spend more money. I don't work for you, Kevin, but I believe the more we spend and the more problems we have financially, leads to a mental health issue.
So I'll talk a little bit about my finances. But what I do is I stopped using my debit card, and I don't use my credit card unless I buy something that's expensive. And I know that I can pay it off right after. But like I'm going on a trip or something and I want the points for my flight, stuff like that. But debit card, I stopped using unless I had to. I'm making an online purchase. But when I go out somewhere, I use cash. Cash hurts more when you give it away. You recognize it when you're passing cash over to somebody and you're spending money on it. You're more aware of the money that you're spending in that way. I think debit cards kind of hurt people my age and younger because they're like, well, I know what's in my bank account. No, you don't, because you probably don't check it, but maybe once a month or twice a month when you get paid. And then you're like, whoa, when did that happen? Using a debit card.
The problem with cash is if you give someone cash, they don't know how to make change.
That is true too. One of the things I learned working in a restaurant.
I would add to that.
Rounding up to the next dollar.
Yeah,
Yeah, I would add to
the
that.
struggles.
Now you have literally it looks like basically there's two different types of currency. You still have your cash and your cash people. But me going out with my parents or my grandparents, and then wanting to paper cash and finding out that they don't take cash was an experience. What do you mean you don't take cash? Like, so then you have to get it on the digital side, which requires a bank account or a pay card or Cash App or these other things. And that's a whole nother way. And so looking at my kids now, they'll get cash as gifts or whatever. Dad, can you put this in the bank so it'll, become, they want to make it digital so they can do something with that money or see their savings account grow or whatever. And to them, it's two different things. I got my cash money over here, but I want to see my money on the digital side grow. So helping, as families, I think we just have to help our kids see it all is the same thing. And that money has to grow and letting them see what money does grow. We do a presentation. I did one yesterday. And the whole point of it, we tell everybody to write down all your expenses and a room like this, and everybody writes down their expenses. And at the end, I asked them, share your expenses. What if you have to? And I said, anybody have savings written down? And nobody ever has savings written down. Most people don't see it as an expense, which leads to a lot of the issues that we're talking about where you can't write a check for $1,000 or whatever.
I think it's a 20, 30, 50 rule.
Mhm.
Is that what it is? You'll get into that later. But yes, you guys can talk about that later. How can families create realistic budgets, like getting rid of Starbucks or tropical smoothie, and that the account for both day-to-day expenses and long-term goals can match up and be realistic?
I was going to jump in on the last one, which feeds into exactly what you just said. So, last time I looked, because I deal with credit card business and stuff like that, most of the businesses are doing 72+% of their business is credit card. That's the way it is. But what I found amazing, it's kind of lost some generations. My grandmother lived through the Depression. She had a book for everything. If she wanted to get something, she saved in the book until she had enough to buy what it was. And that was lost on my mother, which was lost on me. I regained that, I wish I would have done it as a young man, but I was probably in my late 30s, 40s before I figured it out. But that budgeting for the individual that we all have to do for business is lost. And that's what the bankers and the financial advisors should be helping with. And the savings you're talking about, nobody has, save with purpose. Absolutely. And I think that's what's been lost.
Interesting on the flip side, business side of the part, right?
Yeah.
So I know with Virginia ABC, the credit card fees, or just taking that on the payment is $20 million. So part of it, they said, how do we start encouraging people to pay cash? Or can we start charging back to the consumer for that they're using the credit card? But there's so much hidden in a business when a business has to accept a credit card, there are expenses for it as well. It's not a cheap way to do this.
My dad hates credit cards. Working in a restaurant, hates them.
Don't get that in cash basis. Interesting conversation.
What steps can families take to build an emergency fund, and why is it critical for financial stability?
I think they need to identify nice to have instant gratification versus what actually has to be. And as you said, if you talk to any financial person or do it, they'll always say, in your budget, besides your rent, mortgage, food, the very next thing should be savings. then you can go to the movies, then you can go to Starbucks, but we seem to have lost that, and people all want instant gratification, and they go to Starbucks before they save.
I mean, life-changing events, we've got a huge chunk of LA right now. And you ask those people, do you have 3-6 months of savings to survive? Probably not month to month for most people.
Just like, just like our businesses, family needs infrastructure. So in my household, I'm the president. And everyone else is a part of my administration. And we have an economy. We have an economy. And everyone understands that, if we do this, we want to have a strong economy. And we go over what causes a weak economy. And my kids, we invest, I have them investing in loans, I invest in loans. And they see the interest that people are paying. And like, wow, they borrowed $500, they gotta pay $7 back, wow, they are becoming acclimated with how our economic system works. The financial hierarchy, I think if we have infrastructure in the home, that would mitigate and help everyone become mentally aware and conscious of how to deal in emergency fund. Play it safe.
I wish you were my dad.
I didn't know. Yeah, I wish you were my dad. My dad was king. He was just president.
One of the things that kind of slipped into my mind was, how do we handle, not just for kids, but for adults too, really understanding how toxic things like Afterpay, Klarna, what's the other one? Affirm? Those are pretty bad, and they're kind of sneaky forms of debt that you don't really keep track of that easily.
The new payday loan.
Yeah.
So I actually had a conversation in a seminar this last week about those exact services. I don't think inherently they are a bad service, but it's something to be mindful and be in control of. Because for us, and it kind of goes back to that Starbucks theory of like a small $5 to $7 purchase here and there, and our minds don't add up to much. So the same thing with buy now, pay later. If you make $100 purchase and you want to, pay it off in 4, $25 right now is not expensive, right? I think all of us could buy something for $25 and use that expense, for the next 4 weeks. But what happens is we do that one for the 25, and then we have control over that. So we do another one that adds another 25, so now that's 50. And we might be managing that, and then we add another one, and now that's 75, and they just stack up on top of each other. And now we found ourselves in a spot where it has gotten out of control. And I don't think those companies do a great job of communicating that, because that's not how they make money.
It's not their job.
That's not their job. But it does take some self-discipline and understanding, while this could be a resource and a tool, but how do we still maintain control over that?
So I think part of that education is cash flow. That's what you're talking about, right? It seems like a small amount, but what I put another small amount on top of it, and small amount. Starbucks, that also you're like, ooh.
We're really ganging up on Starbucks.
I know,
I just,
I hate to tell you, but this was in the stuff.
This meeting is sponsored by Guerin.
I was gonna say, what really helped me not go to Starbucks anymore was more so like the amount of sugar that they put in their coffee. And when I saw a video, I was like, oh, not putting that in my body anymore. But what type
On
of
your-
financial service? Yeah.
I was gonna say, on your Afterpay though, and one of the things I'm seeing with a lot of our members, they have interest, it used to be interest free. I think that was like a business model, which is pretty clever. That's offer interest free to everybody, and then they'll just keep doing it without realizing that we're now charging 30% interest. And they're charging, regular personal, I say regular because that's like in the consumer loan space, average rate is about 30%, 35%, and they're charging 35% with a hefty processing fee up front for these purchases that'll let you do $25 every 2 weeks or whatever. And people are they're not realizing, all right, yeah, I'm doing it right now because I'm saving money. I can't tell you how many times I've had this conversation. I'm doing it right now because it's cheap right now. I can save money. But if you add the interest you paid, they're overpaying it for the next year or 6 months or whatever, did you really save any money? You didn't. You spent more. So.
I know this is off the topic, but what effect, if we just focused on low-cost housing? I mean, this is all fragmented, but the bottom line is low-cost housing and getting the cost of housing down. Frees up, first of all, the income, but it also gives incentive for people to save. Right now, everything is so out of whack, out of control, you feel helpless. Why save? You can't get there. And so it seems to me that however we come together to attack the problem, we put our energy on the macro issue. I think this is something that you're advocating, Aaron. The macro problem would affect all of these questions.
After the housing prices go up, our property tax goes up, because the housing price goes up, and
Homeowners insurance.
homeowners insurance.
The rent goes up.
I'd have to, and this is just my standpoint. So I don't know what generation I am, but I graduated high school in 2000. And I remember graduating high school and my grandparents telling me, go buy a house. It's the first thing you want to do. And I would look at these brand new houses they were building that cost $120,000. How does anybody pay $120,000 for a house? To me, it was an astronomical number in perspective. You know, paying $1,000 a month for a mortgage at 8%, which was the current rate then and so forth. And I remember my first house we bought was $136,000. I still remember it because I was like, who's going to pay this thing? Anyway, fast forward. I happened to do some work up in Northern Virginia, and a young man came in, 22, 23 years old, $800,000 house and mortgage. And I realized it was perspective because I looked at his budget. And he was paying he was coming in to get some money to buy another property. Like it's just perspective. And sometimes we get into, I'm used to seeing things at this amount. Inflation is taking it up to this amount. The income may not have changed as much, but we have to change how we spend our money and learn the envelope process has been around for eons, right? And it works. We got to get back to doing that and that budgeting and so forth to where we don't live beyond our means.
20% of new car loans are over $750.
I believe it. That's why I have other use.
On that, I'm passing it over to Rob.
All right, Ev is like literally chomping on the bed over here. Well, hi, good morning still. For those who do not know quite yet, my name is Sabrina Guerin. I am the Senior Financial Education Specialist at Virginia Credit Union. So my role at the credit union is to teach classes like this for free in the community, whether it's at a school, whether it's at your business, in the jails and the prisons. That is my primary responsibility. One thing that was mentioned earlier was the importance of personal finance classes in our school system. The credit union recognizes that. We also have 2 other educators that go into our middle, elementary, and high schools and colleges and teaches these classes as well. One of the things that we're finding with the personal finance requirement here in the Commonwealth is that responsibility of teaching that class is still falling on the teachers. I don't know who's aware, but our teachers are experiencing a lot right now. They are severely overworked and severely underpaid. And adding that responsibility of teaching a class that may not be in their wheelhouse, who's really benefiting from that? So that's why we have our educators who, the 2 that go into the school system were previous econ or elementary school teachers licensed through the Commonwealth. But we are teaching this from the expert standpoint. I think that makes a big difference. When we think about building a financial foundation, and I think we've kind of addressed this a little bit in the conversation, is you don't really know where you stand until you look at it from a bird's eye view. And that's something that we do for our members and our community groups. So again, in order to improve your financial health, you kind of got to know where you are right now. If you have your phone and you want to scan that QR code, it takes you to a survey. You don't have to take the survey right now, but at least have it on your phone. So when you leave, you can take 2 minutes and you can find out where you are. We measure financial health into different pillars, under spending, saving, borrowing, and planning. And it gives you a financial health score, and it will either put you in one of 3 buckets. Either you're financially healthy, Either you're coping, meaning, you might be doing great in your areas of spending, but your planning could use a little work. Or you could be financially vulnerable. So we do this year over year with our members. We're actually able to track the health of our finances of our community group. We recently did one in January, and we saw an improvement from July, when the last time we surveyed our members, which I think is incredible. And not to pat ourselves on the back, but I think it speaks to the work that we're doing for our members. The other thing is, you have to overcome the unknown. Someone mentioned it earlier. When we are faced with either a financial burden or a life event, or maybe we just feel like our finances aren't where we want them to be, it is so scary to look and face it head on. How many of us during the holidays know we spend too much shopping for gifts? Like, you just knew that debit card needed to be taken out of your hand. Their credit card is melted. You just knew. But how many of us wanted to face the reality of it and look at the account and see actually the dollar amount that we spent? There's always that apprehension of like, I already know, maybe I didn't do what I needed to do, but I just don't want to deal with it, so I'm not going to pay attention to it. Well, 14% of Americans are that way, and it's with their credit. They're afraid to look at their credit report. It's because there's a fear of the unknown. There's a fear of, well, if it's not what it needs to be, how do I fix it? So we just ignore it. And I think that's a big detriment into the progress that we need to make.
On the healthy side of the credit report, right? My wife and I made the competition who could have a better credit score.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, that's what I
And
did.
it took me 38 years to top her credit score.
I did that with my dad recently. I was like, Dad, what's your credit score? And he told me, I'm like, oh, let me tell you mine. But I think when we look at and it's not just looking at the number, it's actually looking at your credit report. My boss teaches in colleges a lot of the times, and she's been doing this for 15 years. And she said every year that she does it, she has the students go to annualcreditreport.com, pull up their credit report, and there's at least one student that has fraud on their credit reports because they've never looked at it. So I think there's an importance of, one, not just understanding where you stand, but making sure that those numbers and what's being reported makes sense.
Check the report.
Yes, we want to, and if you can afford to do those subscriptions like Norton or LifeLock and whatnot, where they get alerted, that's another added layer that it'll alert you if something's going on. But the biggest thing to overcome is just looking at it. The next thing is we're influenced by our values. We all have them. When we look at making financial decisions, like, we know what we should be doing. We know we should be saving. We know we should be living within our means, but then we have to ask ourselves, why don't we? And it comes back to that disconnect that we often have of what we should be doing and what's important and what our values are, and where is that disconnect coming from? And I think it's because we forget to name those values and realize how they align with our financial goals. Towards the end, I'll have a resource link where you can get that activity. But I encourage you, take a minute, whether it's yourself, if you have a partner or family, and identify like 10 values that are really important to you and how you're aligning your finances with those values. I'll share two of mine. One is gratitude. And I say gratitude as a value of mine is because when you work a job where you kind of have to be on all the time, public speaking is something that is a huge piece of my day-to-day. Shout out to all of my teachers in elementary school that wrote on my report card that I talk too much. Get paid for it now. But when you kind of have to be on all the time, like even the most extroverted person has introverted tendencies. So I get burned out. And there could be mornings where I wake up and I'm like, I really don't want to do this today. Like, I just mentally, I'm not here for it. But I have to do it because I have to earn my income. I have to go to work. So I tell myself every morning, like, you got to name 3 things that you're grateful for. Because no matter what kind of bad day I'm having, there's always someone that's having a worse day. There's always someone who wishes they had a job to go to in the morning. There's someone who wishes they had that opportunity to teach or to share something that they're passionate about. So that's kind of what motivates me to get to work. And the next one is time freedom. I like to be able to go home sometimes and just lounge around with my dog. I'm obsessed with my toy poodle. He's my best friend in the whole wide world. And I like having a job that I can make that schedule to create that extra time. And the reason why that has to do with your finances is because when you think about those things that are important to you, is your career path aligned with those values? Are you working somewhere that you're passionate about that you can stay and work for 30 years? If it's not, how is that creating extra stress on you? Is your employer meeting those financial needs that you have? When I think about your benefits and your compensation, it's not just the paycheck that gets direct deposited to your account. It's your health care. We talked about it earlier. It's your wellness. It's the culture. So you have to consider all of those things when it comes to the income that you're bringing in from month to month, day to day, week to week. So when we think about that foundation, you kind of have to know what your budget is. And this is where we all, I think, hiccup a little bit. We all think that budgeting is a negative term. I don't know if I would have asked anyone here if I told you that you had to go on a budget for something, jump for joy and be so excited about it. There's going to be some type of resistance. A lot of our finances and our financial decisions is psychological. Someone said it over here earlier. We want what we want and we want it right away. We have to have that instant gratification. And sometimes we miss knowing where we are because we don't look at it. So we have to know what our budget is. And I recommend this by pulling those account statements. Every checking account that you have, every savings account, every credit card statement. And I would say pull the next 3 months. And I want you to highlight the things that you notice. That's how I found out how much money I was spending at Starbucks because it just jumped out at me immediately. I mean, I saw it from the second I pulled my account. And then I pulled the next month and I'm like, okay, we have a problem. So look at where your money is going. Assess all of your income sources. If you have a side hustle, if you receive alimony, child support, whatever your sources of income is that you know is coming in, you need to track that. And then you want to start looking at what's going out. A lot of the times we think we know what's going out. We really don't. If you have an iPhone, pull up those settings and go under the subscriptions. I guarantee you might have something that's coming out of your account that you didn't know about because you forgot about it. The 30-day trial was up. Even if it's $1.99, it's still $1.99 that you could be saving. Look at what expenses you can negotiate with. A lot of us feel like just because the AT&T or Comcast said that's the price, is it really the price? You might be in a plan that is costing you more money than you need it to be. So assess what's going on. When you are building that budget, again, you want to know what money is coming in and you want to start the things that you know are coming out, your fixed expenses. What are some fixed expenses? Your mortgage, rent. Hold on. Your car payment? Yes. I'm gonna pause on utilities. Okay. Oh. What else?
Food.
We'll pause on food.
Childcare.
Well, I'll give you childcare.
Oh, insurance. Insurance.
Your insurance. Why is, what was yours? Why is utilities not a fixed expense?
Oh, you make
Yeah.
What those lights are?
Oh my gosh, that's my dad. Look how these lights on. For me, it's water. I'm like, are you washing your hands a little bit? The 20 seconds is the max. That water bill comes through and it's expensive. Why is food a variable expense?
Because you can buy steak or you can buy hamburger, you have the choice.
Can we control the cost of, let's say, eggs right now? Yeah. If you know eggs is something that is part of your diet and you have to have it, and it's $5 a dozen because there's a bird flu, we have no control over that. gas. We all have to get to work. We live in an area where most of us can't rely on public transportation, but can we control the cost of gas and gas costs? But we still have to put it in there, right? So we want to start with the things that we know, the things that do not change. And when it comes to those variable expenses, we want to take an educated guess. You can even go mathematical and do the average of what you typically spend over the course of 3 to 6 months. And when you find that number, give yourself a little bit extra. So if you say on average, I spend $100 a week in gas, give yourself 150. And if you come in below it, wonderful. Do we blow that money on something else? You know what? We're not gonna pick on me now. And then we want to start tracking our spending. We actually want to do this on a regular basis. It's not going to be a one-off. You're not going to pull your statements and automatically solve your financial problems and you're going to have all your goals met. It's something that you're going to have to constantly check in with. You mentioned it earlier. This is my favorite budgeting guide. It's not a rule, even though it says it's a rule, but it's a guideline that I highly recommend. It's the 50-30-20 rule for budgeting. When I go out and I teach, a lot of the people ask me like, well, how do I budget? Like, I know I'm supposed to, and I know I'm supposed to save, but like, how do I do it? Like, how much should I be saving? And my answer is always going to be the same. It depends. Because we all have different financial goals. I would love to retire by the age of 40, but the time on that is not on my side. And so maybe a younger retirement is one of my goals. But if you are already at a retirement age, your financial goal could be different. If you're coming out of college, maybe saving for that first house could be your financial goal. We can't put our finances in a box. We can't put our budgets in a box, but we can give it some framework so that regardless of what income that you have coming in, regardless of what your financial goal is or the expenses that you have coming out, there's something that can kind of guide you along the way. So when we look at the 50-30-20 rule, 50% of your net income, what is that net income? That money that you are scooping up and it's deposited into your account should go to the things that is a need. What are our needs? Housing, transportation, food. What else? Is clothing a need?
No, I mean, well, yeah. Can't go out naked.
So yeah, clothing is a need, but does that mean we have to buy designer?
No.
No. When we talked about transportation, does that include car loans? Raise your hand if you think a car loan can be a need.
Yeah. You gotta drive. Yeah, you gotta get around.
But it depends on the amount too, because that's something you can control.
I would say a car loan is a need because we have to have transportation. And with the cost of what things are right now, I mean, when I was growing up, my first car was a 94 Honda Accord and I wrecked it. And then my dad got me a 2008 Honda Civic. And I sold that after, 2 years ago. So I kept it until literally the wheels were falling off. And then I bought another Honda. And then I hit 2 deer in that Honda and bought an Acura, which is technically another Honda. See the trend that we're going with? Honda was a reliable, affordable vehicle. But a Honda Accord today, brand new, $40-some thousand. My Honda Civic cost me maybe like 15 and it was brand new. So how many of us have $40,000 we're willing to spend on a vehicle in cash right now? So if you need to get to work and you want to have a reliable vehicle, you have to have a car loan. Now, we want to make sure that we are mindful of the car loan, like we don't want to finance a Maserati if we don't have Maserati budgets. So 50% need food, shelter, transportation, clothing to an extent. Then we want to do our wants, 30%. That's our Starbucks money. That's our discretionary funds. That's us going out. That's our entertainment. And then 20% can go towards savings and paying off debt. You can look at this number as 10 and 10. So 10% towards your savings and 10% paying off any high interest debt like credit cards, student loans, putting extra money aside for things you want to pay down. And out of all three of these buckets, what do we do first?
Savings, always subtract away.
Pay yourself first.
Say it louder for me.
Pay yourself first.
Pay yourself first. You do that 20 or 10% first because we are human. And typically what happens is when we get our paychecks and we say, I'm gonna do all the needs first. I'm gonna pay all the bills. I'm gonna get everything done. And then everything that's left over this month, I'm going to save. And then what happens?
Zero.
There's nothing left to save. Because in theory, we try to do all those needs first, but then, oh, the kids had that field trip. I forgot I have to put that money there. Or we go to the grocery store and you saw that they had a new like 6-pack flavor of Oreos and that busted your grocery budget. And then by the time we get down to it, 50% of needs might actually be 60%. And that 30% took the rest and there's nothing left over. We have to get in the habit of paying ourselves first. I think of it as a muscle. You might put $100 aside the next time you get paid in your savings account and take it right back out, but at least you're working towards it. I highly recommend auto deposited. Have it automatically transferred there. One, we might not see it, so we don't miss it. And if you do go back and forth and you're like, okay, well, I got to take it out. Think about that weightlifting again. If you said your friend was a bodybuilder, what weight did he have you start off at?
He had me start out with body weight, to be honest with you.
Body weight.
Yeah.
So nothing added. Because if you were to, if he would have told you to start off with a 100-pound dumbbell, could you do it?
I'm gonna say yes, because y'all are.
You might get a rep in, right? And by a rep, you might get like one lift. The same thing happens with, and it hurts. And the same thing, it happens with your savings. Like you might not be able to immediately get to that 20% or 10% and leave it there. You might have to take a little bit out, but you have to keep at it. A lot of times with us, in general, when we miss that first savings attempt or that first savings goal, we say, what's the use? I can't do it. I'm not going to do it anymore. And then we give up. But we have to remind ourselves it's like a weight that we have to keep lifting towards.
One thing that we would do is, so if we're going from one paycheck to the next, right? And we have any money left when that second paycheck come around, we dump it into the same, no matter how much it is, because that helps to save, because ordinarily you probably would have just went and spent it. So rather than spending it, take it out really quickly.
That's wonderful. There's a lot of ways that you can, I call it giving your savings a raise. Tax time is coming up. If you get a refund, you have to spend all of it. You can put some aside for savings goal. If you are getting a merit increase with your employer, I know we just had some. If you get a 3% raise, do you have to technically take that 3% in your paycheck? You can take 1% and put the other 2 into your 401k or retirement plan. There's different ways that you can mindlessly boost your savings across time. The biggest thing that I think we find ourselves in is lifestyle creep, living beyond the means. How many of us have ever been in a position where we had the income and ends were meeting? We may not have been saving as much as we wanted to, but the bills were paid on time. We felt good, but we just wish we had a little breathing room in our budget. And then we get whether a raise at work or another job, but our income has increased and we're like, finally have some breathing room. And it feels great, right? And then you're like, oh, but now that I'm making a little bit more money, I could get that bigger car that we've been talking about. And then we go get that bigger car and they're right up against that budget again. And we're kind of holding our breath and we're like, oh, I wish I had a little breathing room. And then we get more income and we're like, oh, this is nice, making some more income. I have money I can set aside. But I wanted that new, what's a toy? Give me a toy. motorcycle, boat, something, jet ski. I don't do bikes. And we buy that thing and we're like, oh, my budget is so tight. And then we get that raise. It's a cycle.
Yeah.
We chase the money that we earn. So every time we get a bump in pay, we create an expense to go right up against it. And 61% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck because of it.
Just to comment on that, the Richmond's new mayor, Danny Avila, gave a presentation last night. And he was talking about that. And so what were they about, what, 4 days? Basically saying that is seriously gonna impact so many of the Richmond city residents. So we're letting them delay their utility bills, power bills, and all of that. And because people are living paycheck to paycheck, you pull 3 days out and they can't pay their bills.
And when I say paycheck to paycheck, it's regardless of the income. It could be a 6-figure income. When I worked at the branches at my other credit union, I did a loan application for a gentleman who earned well over a 6-figure income and had an 850 credit score. 850 is the very highest credit score that you can currently have. And he was applying for, a reasonable loan for whatever the case was. And I had to tell him no. I had to deny his loan application at 850, making over 6 figures in income. Why do you think I had to tell him no? His debt to income, he was overextended. We were not willing to take on a financial risk because any moment now, something was going to be too much and he was not going to be able to handle it. So that's regardless of what your credit looks like. That's regardless of what kind of income. Living paycheck to paycheck can touch every single economic bracket. So there's some, I mentioned a few earlier, ways to boost your nest egg. And I think that's foundational is one, paying yourself first. Acknowledge that your future self is an expense. Can we predict the future? Do we know what's going to happen tomorrow? Next week? Next month? What about 2 hours from now? We might have something on our calendars, but can we really predict what's going to happen? So even though we can't predict the future, we can have our finances anticipated as best as we can. Because when we don't prepare ourselves for the unexpected and acknowledge that there's an expense that's going to come up, what usually happens in those cases? We can make impulsive decisions. What else can happen? Job. You could lose your job. Where does that money come from when we don't have it saved? Loans and credit. I told you I hit a deer, right? In my Honda. Two in the same car. And the first time I hit one, I'm like, okay, as long as I have money in my account for my insurance deductible, I should be in good shape. And then I had that incident and I had to pay my insurance deductible and I'm like, okay, well, I'm glad I had that money aside. Well, a lot of people don't know that when you have rental coverage through an insurance claim, you only have 30 days of rental coverage. And it took 90 days for my car to be fixed. Where do you think that money had to come from? Because I had to get to work. Credit card. Had I saved a little bit more money, maybe I didn't have to get into that unnecessary debt. That's what happens when we don't properly prepare our savings or anticipate it. Again, we don't have a magic crystal ball or 8-ball, but we can always try to anticipate the best we can by acknowledging ourselves as an expense. Rob said it earlier. A lot of us don't, when we look at our budgets, we forget to put down savings. It is a bill. It is an expense. Your future self is going to need it for something. And then you want to trim your expenses where you can. You can negotiate some bills. Again, take a look at your cell phone bill. Are you getting the best plan? If you are in college and you have a college discount, military, my dad is the ripe age of mid-70s. So anywhere we go, I'm like, you got that senior discount. I'll pay you back. Or his military discount. There's a way to trim your expenses where you can.
Talk about college, right? My budget in college for weekly versions, I lived off campus, was $26. That's what I lived on. Coupons, shopping wholesale, hamburger helper, go with that, right?
Ramen noodles.
And I would splurge my ingredients like chili, that was my splurge, if I had a couple extra dollars. But it was down to looking at those small numbers and saying, this is all I have for. And that was the discipline.
And I think we have to reiterate some of these principles. You know, one, we have to acknowledge that society is different. The way that we live is different. The way that our younger people are doing things, it's not necessarily wrong, because you also have to think about the economy that we've left to them from generations prior. You know, when I was in college for the first time, my dad would look at my bank statement. He's like, if I see McDonald's on your account one more time, I'm gonna drive to Baltimore and I'm gonna choke you out myself. I'm like, yes, sir. But my siblings, that was just not the lifestyle that they had. There's a huge generational gap between me and my siblings. So we have to acknowledge the differences in the lifestyles, but how do we instill these values going back to what's really important from an early age? Kids start mimicking our behaviors as early as 2 and 3 years old. That's why money is not real to them, because when we go to the grocery store, how do we pay for stuff? By card. So that's why children don't know that this is a dollar bill and this is a quarter, because we don't practice that with them in front of them. And this is going to be, I think, the hardest part for some of us. And for many of us is prioritizing our spending. Again, most of the financial foundations is psychological. We are human, we want what we want, and we want what we want right now because it makes us feel good. It makes things better for us. So when we are out and about and we really have to buckle down on our spending and be acknowledgeable of it, I think I call it a moment of pause. And regardless if you're shopping online, if you're shopping in store, just giving yourself a moment of pause to ask some of these questions, you'll start to see yourself putting things back or taking them out of your cart. First one is, do I need this? And you're going to convince yourself that you do. And then you want to say, do I need this now? And then you still might convince yourself that you do need it now. I love TJ Maxx and Marshall, so that's always this, yes, I need it because it might not be here when I come back. Could I get this item for less? Or what happens if I don't buy this? Is the world going to stop if I don't buy this right now? Give yourself 24 hours. If you are an online shopper, leave it in your car for 24 hours, go to sleep, don't think about it, and see if you come back to it. A lot of times you might not. Convenience. We make it so easy to pay for things. You can literally tap your phone on something and there you go, it's charged. If you are someone that recognizes that, you have to know yourself. Take your payment methods off your phone. Don't save it to Amazon. I always have one person say, but I love Amazon, it's so easy. Well, on a nice cold winter evening like tonight, and you're snuggled up on the sofa, and you have to get up off from under the blanket, walk across the home, find your card, type in all 16 digits, the 3-digit code on the back, and the expiration date, more likely in the dark light too. Are you really going to take that extra time? If you take away the convenience, it might not be worth it to do it afterwards. And then understanding what goes into our buying decisions. Remember, a lot of it is mental. Keeping up with the Joneses. What is that? Competing with your neighbor. Jimmy got a boat, so now I got to get a boat. The neighbors, the status quo, the neighbors behind us got a boat, a fence, solar panels, and a shed within the same week. And my husband's like, huh, you must have a lot of money. I'm like, or a lot of debt. But what else is keeping up with the Joneses? Where does it happen?
Oh.
All right, girls, leave this together. Had it not been for social media, would you would have known about that cup?
So here's a little story about that cup.
It's amazing.
It's amazing. So Stanley had made camouflage and green ones for 75 years. Sales had peaked at $14 million a year for the last 70 years. Then they hired this new marketing person from a women's fashion retail, and they made them pink like that, and they made them women's colors, and they became, in the first year, $85 million they sold from 14 million, because you women had to have that pink. Women were going to stores for the day the shipment came in. It was the biggest trend at the end of 2023.
The marketer in me loves the story behind Stanley because they were failing. Like I mean, and they're a long-term brand, but it took one change of audience, and it changed the trajectory of their business. But what happens is, yes, I got the pink one, but now I have to have that black one, and then there's a blue one because of
No, they're more than 20.
that costs $45.
But so the other point, they purposely did that, like Pete's and Reese was a different color, so that you had to have colors match your outfit. Yeah, colors gotta match your outfit.
Yeah.
And it's not just the Stanley. It could be anything.
Yeah.
Whatever hobby that you have. You know, if you're on social media, we always see what other people have. And it makes us feel like we are insufficient.
Yeah.
Or that we're not doing enough, or we don't have enough. And it's not just from a product standpoint, it could be the houses. I hate to admit it sometimes, but I love watching the videos of women clean their houses. Knowing I'm like, I could probably dust my house right now. But then I start getting ideas of like, oh, I love how she has that set up, or I love how that looks. We are easily influenced by what we see, and that has a direct impact on our finances. Spending habits. I think we've beat this one down. What could be a spending habit? It could be Starbucks. It could also be like, how many of us go get gas at Wawa and then go into the store real quick and grab a candy bar or a quick soda? And that candy bar that's $1 and some change might just be $1 and some change, but every single time you go fill up your gas tank, are you spending a little bit extra? How does that add up? The buy now, pay later services that's a habit of how you shop, and they add up on each other. So we have to recognize what that habit could be, and it's not necessarily saying it's wrong or that we shouldn't do it. We just have to be more in control over it. For those who did not hear the Starbucks story, the way that I mitigated it, I still drink Starbucks. I was almost on the way to get one today before I got here. But I had gotten so out of control, and I could see how much money I was spending every single week, and it just was not conducive to my financial goals. So I put myself on a Starbucks budget, and I went from spending like $100 a week to $25 every 2 weeks. It was a huge cut.
Yeah.
And I went from like a really big drink. I went from a venti to a grande to a tall to not at all. Because I had to wean myself off of it, but I still allow myself to have that something that pick me up, that hurt. But I had to get myself more over control over it. And I just put it on a gift card and called it a day. Now I don't have to do that because I recognize, okay, if I've gotten Starbucks twice this week, maybe I should cut back this for the next few days. And that could go with anything. My husband was, before Apple Music and Spotify was like a thing for a subscription, he would always buy like apps or buy iTunes and stuff. So he had to put it on a gift card and manage it that way. Retail therapy. Okay.
Talking about habits.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when our daughter first went to college, it was during the time of Hurricane Katrina, because Katrina had just hit. So she was used to the way that we live, you know, steak and lobster, because we're from New Orleans, we eat a lot of seafood, right? And so when she got in college, the money that was saved for her for college, she had to blew it the first month. You know, party over here, everybody in her room, because she's buying everybody wings, and not knowing that money is going to go away. She just felt like, because the way that we were, you know, we bring people out to eat while we were there. And so she was doing those same habits, as you mentioned, they follow the habits of their parents. She was doing the same thing that we had done.
We do, we learn those habits from our environment. I think you had shared that your dad was more of the money mindful one, and mom was the shopper, and you lean towards the same.
I think it's hereditary. I always like something to blame on.
Yeah.
But as you start looking at what's important, we have to start shifting our mindset. I was definitely the spender. I'm still a spender. We're not gonna call anybody out.
I don't think there's any finger pointing like that.
But I acknowledge that about myself. A lot of what we do with our money is self-acknowledgement. So if you know that you're a shopper or a spender, or it's easy or money doesn't feel real, what barriers can you put in place? For me, I mentioned like I love TJ Maxx, I love Marshalls. So if I know I have to be a little bit more mindful, or that 30% is maxed, when I leave work, I have to go straight home. Because if I even like drive by it, it's like a little voice that says, and it draws me in. Like Target, I swear they put something in the air and you just like black out and there's stuff in your basket that you had no idea even existed.
Yeah, if they probably actually do is they probably use sensory in there, because that was studied years ago, sensory stimulation, which encourages you to buy.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm definitely overstimulated in retail therapy. What does that mean? Or what does it mean to you?
I'm laughing about Marshalls because I grew up in the Boston area. My mother was a shopaholic. She didn't drive. My dad had to drive her everywhere. But there was 3 different Marshalls in different cities. And each one of them got their new shipment of goods on a different day. And my mother knew exactly what day on what store so that she could go to Marshalls, because to your point, it'll be gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. We used to laugh about it. So Marshalls was a family joke at every household growing up going, oh yeah, we're at Marshall.
And if you know where like the sticker, like Target, if it ends in 97, then you know that's the lowest price it's gonna go. If it ends in 99, it's gonna go down one more time in price.
This is a science, boy. I tell you, you got it down.
You learn something about your coworker every day. Yeah. So when I think about retail therapy, I always think of like the rom-coms with the girl who like got her heart broken and she like kicks him out and she goes on a shopping spree and buys a whole new wardrobe, right? Is that common, like, making you feel better? But retail therapy could also be like, hey, I got a promotion at work. High five to me. Hey, I did good on my diet. I'm gonna go treat myself to something. It could be I had a good day. It could be I had a bad day. It could be I'm bored. It could be I don't know what to do with myself. Retail therapy could be anything. But what it is at its core is when you tie your emotions to spending money. So when what you have to do is kind of be mindful and check in with yourself. Am I buying this because it's self-soothing something else? And if it is, you have to start addressing like the root cause of it. I think mental health care is something that is so important in all areas of your life. I personally go to therapy every other Monday. Love my therapist. She's fine, fantastic. And I don't talk to her because something's going wrong. I talk to her to check in to make sure I'm reaching whatever goal it is. Last year it was setting boundaries. Money is love. This one's a hard one for some people to recognize. What is money is love?
Positive relationship.
Could be a toxic relationship with a retailer.
I know, me and my wife, I don't know when it happened. I think it was just that we were so happy that we were actually able to save some money, but it was like a series of anniversaries where we didn't really get to do anything special. Like we go to Williamsburg, to paint a picture, the first one we went to like Dominican Republic, our honeymoon, we were in Cancun. After that, we went to New York. That was when I'm telling you about the Starbucks timeshare. And then after that, it was like Williamsburg, she was pregnant. After that, next time she was pregnant again, we went to Baltimore. So it was like, and then after that, we had money because we had 2 new kids, So when we finally were able to save up again, it was the gifts started getting more expensive and the trips getting elaborate because we were able to go out again. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago we realized we were spending a lot of money on these gifts. And that's what I think about when money is love. It's like, I love her. We made it through a whole year. She tolerated me for a whole year. She's still here. Let me go. What can I do?
You still need to do that.
Okay. You've been talking to her too much. So, but you spend this money thinking that it's kind of, attached to it, when a lot of times the thought would pass the same, putting the thought into the gift or the time would pass the same information along. It's just, we're used to spending the money and that price tag showing the value.
I think that comes hard for grandparents, but. Because we often, we have to have this for our grandbaby,
My mother, this past Christmas, we were in Marshall's looking for something completely different. And she picked up 2 suitcases. She's like, I've bought all my grandkids suitcases before, which I'm trying to figure out where she did that. But in her mind, she's done it. And she was looking to buy it for her 2 great grandkids. And one of the suitcases was $99. And I'm like, are you insane? You're not going to spend, I will not let you spend $100 on a suitcase for a 3-year-old because it had Mickey Mouse on it. You have to pay the Disney price. And she could not get her mind around why, I was being negative about it. And I was like, I'm not saying don't buy the thing. I'm saying don't buy this thing that costs this much, because you're not getting your bang for your buck. You can buy a literally grown-up size suitcase for the same price, and you're buying something for a 3-year-old because it's a sentiment behind it that you've always done. You have to get the emotion out of it and be practical in what you're spending. So that's another example of how we show money as love. It could also be someone took you out to lunch, so now you feel like you have to take them out to lunch. Or someone did something nice for you, so now you have to reciprocate it. It could be the holiday season when you just feel heavy on your heart to give to every charitable donation. My husband thinks that I am so heartless sometimes whenever we go to the stores and they're like, would you like to solve childhood diabetes? I'm like, no, not today. And it's not because I don't care about that cause. It's because I know corporations already pay that money and they're getting a tax credit from it. And whether or not they've paid it, they are having you reimburse it for them. So in my mind, I'd rather give my charitable donation directly to an organization or give my time, which is also equally valuable. We also have online resources. So as a community member, not even just a credit union member, we feel like there are a lot of things that our community and our society are missing when it comes to building financial foundations and getting that financially healthy. If you were to scan this QR code, it just takes you to a link on our website and it gives you a lot of online resources. We do have videos that are free, they're on demand. If you feel like watching me again for maybe 6 minutes or so, you can watch one of my videos. But there's budget sheets, that value worksheet is there. We really do push the health and the wealth of our community through education. It's so important because a lot of the times we see that we can't reach our goals is because we don't have that knowledge behind it. And we try to move that needle as much as possible. I'm going to stop yapping about that part. We already talked about saving where you can. Track your expenses and trim it where you are. Seek out the best deals wherever you can. Do it yourself. If you have a skill or a talent, lean into those skills or those talents. I am not a professional painter, but as long as the paint is on the wall and not the floor and the ceiling, I think I have done my job. However, I am not a hairstylist. I will not cut my own hair because then that would cost me more money to have it fixed. So when I say do it yourself, know your ministry, know your skills, avoid impulse buying. Again, if you know yourself and you know what those triggers are, try to avoid those places when you need to tighten up on that budget a little bit. And then find free events and entertainment. We live in a wonderful city. I'm proud to be a Richmond native, and there's always something going on that is either low cost or free. I believe if you still go to our website, you might have to hunt for it, but a lot of credit unions offer, it's called Tickets at Work. It's an online discount website where you can get discounted tickets for different things.
Does the Virginia Credit Union have that?
I believe we do. If you have to hunt for it on I think it's under member benefits, but it'll be on that website.
Another quick question.
Sure.
You were talking about budget sheets. Do y'all have a budget app?
We don't have an app specifically, but I do believe that, Acorns is a good one to use. It kind of also lets you know what things are being unused. Those subscription services really kill us sometimes. It's easy to lose sight of. It's easy to forget about, and they drain our pockets every single month. And I want to say there's some legislation going on right now where they have to, unsubscribing for stuff has to be like now one click away. You used to be able to have to like call and whatnot. If you're a nerd like me and you're following the information about like TikTok being banned, a lot of people are leaving Meta products. So they're deleting their Facebooks, and it takes 30 days to delete Facebook. It should not take 30 days. If you say, I don't want something, you should be able to say, I don't want it, and it'd be instant, but it takes them 30 days to do it. So I think there's some lobbying that needs to be done on that front as well. As far as recognizing what subscriptions that we have or services that we have and how to instantly unenroll from them. I'm gonna leave this part up in case you want to look at some of our online resources. And I'm gonna hand it over to Rob, my colleague, to tell you more about what his team does, and some benefits that we have at the credit union.
So my team, we've worked with the financial education team. As she said, my name is Rob. Built the credit union about 10 years, been a member since I was 16. My mom worked for the state at a department called the Virginia Educational Loan Authority, which is no longer in existence, but some of you may know what that is. But that's how I got into Virginia Credit Union. I saw it open and I was very anxious to join and take advantage of the opportunity. So what I do is I actually travel around the state. The credit union has partnerships. As I said, they started out as a state employees credit union. And so they have partnerships with every state agency and every department within the whole Commonwealth. So that's a big stretch. You talk about Harrisonburg. That's why I know so much about Harrisonburg. I used to have that territory. In fact, my boss is traveling to Roanoke today, and he'll be in Roanoke until next Wednesday. I've seen some of our partners out there. But now my territory, or I should say, let me back up a little bit. Now we have extended from just state agencies to local government and even select employers throughout the Commonwealth, like Xfinity, Amazon, Lego Company. There's some other big employers throughout the Commonwealth where we work with as well. Hospital systems, public universities, all the above. So all of them are eligible to join Virginia Credit Union. And by extension, my team goes out and we try to bring credit union benefits to them. One such benefit is financial education. So we'll go out and make presentations similar to this to the workforce so that companies can have a wellness program, as we were talking about a little earlier. One other benefit that we bring is we might set up a table and answer one-on-one questions. So someone could bring their credit report. We actually do some financial mentoring, which was our first line of topic this morning, right? At a couple of different partners in the community. Well, people will come with their credit report and we're looking and monitoring their progress as they're trying to reach a financial goal. So that's kind of what my team does. We are mainly responsible for bringing in new memberships and helping to fill the needs of our existing members with our current products and services and any updates in the credit union. So you might be aware we recently had a huge merger with Member One. We also recently became a federal credit union. And we're still all figuring out what all that means, other than the fact that our teams got bigger and we now have more responsibility. But with that, there are a lot of things that we are now able to do. One big change is because we're federal, it's not just different communities that make you eligible anymore. So there's going to be some things opening up in the months and years to come where we might have eligible community or way that people are eligible. In Richmond, you're pretty much eligible anywhere around here now. Because everybody lives, works, or worships somewhere in the city of Richmond. So you have some kind of eligibility. But in outlying communities, that will give us more of a reach where we can help and have a positive impact. Other thing that I just am listening to a lot that was talked and discussed today, our leadership, our pillars, is very largely based on influence in the community and impact in the community. So we have a huge, absolutely huge community outreach team that goes out. In fact, you were talking about JA earlier. They just had a notice come on. We need 10 more volunteers for JA. So they're going to get them and we'll be in JA. And we're very regular with our participation in JA. But that is all over the state. So one of the great things about being a member of Virginia Credit Union, you're part of those efforts. You are allowing us to be able to continue those efforts in providing financial education, providing assistance and even, physical manpower to these different communities in the outreach that we're doing all over the Commonwealth. Well, that's kind of my little spiel. Is there any questions that we can answer for you, either on the presentation side or on the credit union side, or?
What's the difference between a federal credit union and a state credit union?
I have no idea. No, I will tell you this. Virginia Credit Union was, as a state credit union, well, I think we were number 2. We were the largest credit union in Virginia, but we were in like the top 4 credit unions operating in Virginia. As a federal credit union, we're now on a bigger list. All right. Federal credit unions do not have the same parameters, geography parameters, as a state chartered credit union does. So ultimately, that is the big difference.
And it's,
now,
it's regulations as well.
Now, sorry?
The credit union is higher or
I think we're 22. Now that's not in the state, that's federal. So that's great. So for instance, not a lot of people know Langley Credit Union is huge. I didn't know they were as big as they are. But they're in the top 5. I mean, they're huge. Navy is obviously the biggest
Number one.
Yeah.
We're number 2 in the state of
Virginia. In Virginia, yeah.
No, Navy's number 1.
Yeah. But I was gonna say, we've always had members outside of Virginia. You just had to be in Virginia when you joined. All right, so we have members in England and UK and different areas that are still able to use us through the SharePoint service and conduct their business. And then we have a great online platform. So federal won't really impact a lot of us, especially living in the state. But those that are outside of the state, they'll have some good benefits there, being able to join us.
It makes us easier to operate too, like because of so banks are regulated by the FDIC, we're regulated by the NCUA. So basically what has happened is if we look at a regulation as a state credit union, we look at the book, it's like, okay, page 12, and it says, see federal regulation. Okay, look at this book. So now instead of having to go use the regulations of a state credit union that tells us to regulate as a federal credit union, we eliminate that book altogether and we can simplify how we operate.
Thank you for that question. Any other questions? Yes.
How do you reach the Hispanic community?
We're working to do even more of that. As many of us know, there are areas of Richmond that probably have a larger Hispanic population than others. And so we're trying to do more in those areas. And same thing with employers. For instance, I think it's Goya, I'm probably saying it wrong, but Goya Foods, they have a huge Hispanic population. And we've been doing financial education for them for the past year or so, offering it in Spanish, which is pretty cool. So we have some Spanish speaking employees that are able to go with us, but we also invest in programs in like Bonsai.
I was like, yeah, Bonsai.
I can't think what it's called, but like Bonsai, which is an online platform that provides financial education in 11 languages. So we have another major employer, it's called Super Radiator Coils. They've got people from all over the world as far as their employees go, and they speak a number of languages. Well, all of them are able to receive financial education in their mother language where they can understand it better, process it better, and make better financial decisions rather than us just presenting it in English. So thank you for the question. Very nice question.
If you have like a group that has a language that is other than English, if we can work together to provide a translator. I did a home buying session for International Rescue Committee last year. And the dialect there was Farsi. Because a lot of them were Middle Eastern refugees. My brother speaks Farsi because he's in the military. I do not. So they had a translator come out. So as long as we know ahead of time, I may not be able to get the written material translated, but we'll take the extra time to do the presentation with said translator. It does take a little bit longer because again, we're essentially saying everything twice, but we want to make it as equitable as possible. We can also try to get some resources. I do a class on how to protect your identity and avoid identity theft. So I'm able to get resources directly from the Federal Trade Commission that is translated. So we know that that is the appropriate translation and dialect there.
And one thing I'll tell you just about the credit union in general, the credit union has always been leading on the technology, Virginia Credit Union, I should say. For example, we were the first to premier mobile banking in Virginia. It's pretty cool to have that as something you can put your. So we've always thought ahead. So we're looking at things like AI and things where that we can use translation with technology as it is evolving and coming up where we can use that to teach and make people more financially confident in different communities and different across different language barriers and things of that nature as well.
So how are you dealing with cryptocurrency?
I'm staying away from it. I lost so much money. No, I think they probably would be better equipped to answer that question for you. But I will tell you, one lesson I've learned in doing these presentations, and we have a team that offers financial planning and investing and things of that nature and sitting through their presentations as well, is if you don't know about it, don't invest in it. You say, because there's so many. We all learn by stories. I'll give you just a quick story because that's how so a buddy of mine who's pretty good, financially, CEO of this company, big company too. He calls me, he says, "Hey, have you ever invested in Bitcoin before?" I said, "No." He said, "Do it now. I don't care what you got in your savings, put it in Bitcoin." I said, "I'm not putting all my money in." So I put like $1,500 in Bitcoin. At the time, I think it was down like 27. If anybody can think back, if you're into that, during COVID, it went down to like $27,000 for like 3 days. Then it shot up to like 50,000. So I made money, good amount of money. Well, me not knowing anything about the market, I've never invested on my own outside of like my Roth and my what we have in my IRAs and things like that in my 401k. I was like, okay, this is great. I'm gonna leave it in there. Well, then it went down again. And so I wound up getting out exactly what I put in, which I guess is not bad because I know a lot of other people that lost a lot of money. In fact, if I had left it in long enough, now it's back up again. I probably, would still be good, but I took it out at the wrong time.
100,
yeah. And I took it out at the wrong time and put in another cryptocurrency, which really is underperforming. So don't even get me started with that one. But my point is, don't do it. unless you do the research about it, right? Yeah.
It's always gonna be speculative.
Yeah.
It's never gonna be a guaranteed thing at all.
That's it.
Oh, wow.
The FBI would say, don't do it.
Thank you very much, guys. Thank you so much.
I want to make it clear, thank you for usually sponsor for tonight conversations, so you guys will be present in so many ways with us and opening accounts for people to attend. I can't wait. It's up to you. So now we have Evie gonna wrap it up on mentorship. You don't have to do questions anymore because we've already done that conversation. So we're trying to wrap it up in 25 minutes. And the presentation
Not
is
25, I'm gonna do it in like 10.
and your presentation is spot on. No problem.
One of the things that I did want to touch base on before we end today was from a mentee perspective, having been mentoring. And for me, I've had two very important mentors in my life. My father being the first one, Barry being the second one. And I'll get into my story in a second, but I want to touch base on some statistics when it comes to mentorship. 55% of mentored young adults or youth are more likely to enroll in college. 78% more likely to volunteer regularly and be mentors themselves. 46% are less likely to start using drugs or drinking alcohol, which is a big issue in our community today. 5 times more likely employees are to be promoted and reporting a higher job satisfaction after being mentored. 70% of Fortune 500 companies have formal mentorship programs. That's really important. And so to further justify that, if the statistics don't speak for themselves, I'll talk to you about my story. So I started working for my dad when I was 13 years old. And I'll never forget the day. I was a very, very shy kid growing up. When it came to peopling, I didn't want to do it. I think the extent was school. And then I went home and that was it. And then reading my books. And I'll never forget, I was sitting down with my mom, my dad, my siblings, 13 years old over the summer. And he looks at me, very relaxed. Nothing can bother this man. Okay, bomb could go off next day. He looks at me and he's like, it's time for you to work in the restaurant. My stomach drops because I grew up in the restaurant. I know how many people go in and out of there every single day. I know what the interaction is like with people in the restaurant every single day. I didn't want to do it. And he looks at me and he's like, this might seem like the worst nightmare for you, but it is the best gift I could give you. And he was so right. He was so right. Every day I was in that restaurant at 13 years old, bussing tables, taking orders, posting, calling people, answering phones. I hated it. I didn't like it at all, but I did it. And I did it all the way up through college. And I worked a second job. And do you know what people told me every time they met me? I didn't see myself as exceptional or any different or being able to communicate with people any differently than anybody else. But people would tell me all the time, I can't believe how old you are. You speak very professionally. You communicate very professionally. And to me, I'm thinking, what are these people talking about? You know, I mean, I've got 18 years old. I can't wait to go have fun with my friends on the weekend. But I was able to communicate with people 2-3 times my age. And very comfortable and understand that. And not only that, having known what it's like being in the service industry, I had a newfound respect when I would go out and communicate with people in their positions, which a lot of young people today don't know what that's like. But I do have 2 shout outs to that. WBL, Work-Based Learning, and Cristo Rey. For those of you that don't know about Cristo Rey, it is a school here in Richmond that helps underserved kids be able to learn what it's like to be a young professional and learn basically essentially what would be a private education. And I think that's phenomenal. I got a private education. I hated it, but it did me a lot of good. Again, my dad was right. Don't like to admit it, but he was right. And I think that those kids already have a one-up to anybody else that they meet in college, which, by the way, 100% graduation rate at Cristo Rey. Again, you don't see that very often. And the second part of my mentorship was with Barry. And I met Barry later in my professional career, actually a year ago. It's my 1-year anniversary with the BBB. And I met him just having coffee, visiting my grandma at my uncle's place. And he gets to talking to me and he's like, your parents did a great job raising you. And I said, it wasn't my parents, it was a restaurant. But yes, it was also my parents. And one of the things that I got to talking to him about is so many people my age have this expectancy to be at a certain point in their career, but they don't understand the skill set that it takes to get there. And part of getting that skill set means having somebody who is a mentor to teach you. I can't tell you, there's a quote from Friedrich Nietzsche. And essentially what he says is, the amount of work it takes to build the bridge to get to the other side of the stream is worth any type of pain or conflict you're going to get through. But having a coach or a cheerleader on the other side telling you you can do it makes it a whole heck of a lot easier. Because one of the issues that we have is we don't have anybody to believe in us. Barry saw something in me that I didn't see. When he called me and he said, I think you should interview for this position, I was like, you're crazy, man. You are nuts. And he's like, no, you can do it. And even now to this day, he'll call me in his office and he's like, you're doing great, but what's wrong with you? And I'll say, what are you talking about? He's like, stop doubting yourself. Stop doubting yourself. You got this. You can do it. Having a mentor is so important. From childhood to adulthood to being a baby boomer. And so this month is National Mentorship Month, which is why we included it in this topic for today. And I'll leave you all with that.